Hello, everybody. Welcome into a new episode of Capital View, a weekly webcast brought to you by the Daily Journal and djournal.com. And I'm Brad Locke, your host, joined as always by Capitol Bureau Chief Bobby Harrison down in Jackson here on this Monday, March the 13th. Coming to you every Monday around 2 p.m. here live at djournal.com. And if you miss it or want to catch the replay later on, just find us right here on the website. Bobby, how you doing on this Monday?
All right, Brad, it's amazing. We're just about right on the schedule today.
I know we had so far, we've had no technical glitches. Okay, we'll try to make it through the next 15 minutes or so without having any. But we got started today without anything going wrong, so it's like a minor miracle. We've got a lot to pack into today's episode. Bobby, got toward the end of the week last week, and a lot of stuff kind of happened. We're going to try to cover as much of it as we can. Let's start with the transportation funding. Bobby, we thought it was pretty much dead. It's been revived. They had some legislation that was that passed overwhelmingly in the House on Thursday, Bobby, to try to divert some of this online tax money to road and bridge repairs. Tell us exactly how that went down.
Well, it seems like we have been talking about online tax collections all session, Brad, and what this bill, while the House was trying to pass legislation to try to force these online retailers to collect the sales tax, or actually use tax, the 7% tax on the retail items they sell to Mississippians. At the same time, the Department of Revenue was making an effort to voluntarily get these companies to collect and remit the tax to the state, and they're having a lot of success in getting the companies to voluntarily collect the tax. And what the House did was pass legislation that would require that money that is collected to go to provide work on roads and bridges on the state and local level. The estimate is it'd be between 50 and 70 million annually, and that amount will grow as the online presence and shopping activity grows in future years. So that's legislation passed the House last week, and it now goes to the Senate. In addition, to the House has also passed a $50 million bond bill to finance work on local bridges, and so those two issues are alive, passed the House, and are pending in the Senate.
And how this happened, Jeff Smith and Trey Lamar, they head up the Ways and Means Committee in the House. They amended a bill that had to do with something else, didn't they, to get this proposal in?
Right. Yeah, it was another bill that had that was similar enough. It had the code sections dealing with tax collection, so they were able to put that into the legislation and send it to the Senate.
So if this passes,
it's amazing there's all sorts of options in the Senate and in the legislature to pass things when they die.
Yeah, exactly. No bill is maybe truly dead until the session's over. So this legislation, if passed, if it makes it all the way through, would divert 50% of the funds of these online tax revenue funds each year to the Mississippi Department of Transportation, 25% each to the cities and counties. But before the MDOT can get those funds, it would have to find $25 million in savings. Bobby, is that right?
Right, find savings in their agency that would also be diverted to work on roads and bridges. And of course, Brad, this all came about. For years there's been a clamor that the roads in the state and the bridges were in a state of disrepair, and there needed to be more in an effort to get those up to standards. And MEC, Mississippi Economic Council, proposed a couple of years ago spending $375 million per year to get the roads up to the transportation system up to par. But the House and Senate leadership has not been able to come up with a proposal that they could get a agreement to raise taxes to do that. So the House has been trying to sort of get around that by going to the internet sales tax as a way to garner money for the roads and bridges. Of course, it's not nearly as much as MEC and others say is needed, but still, most people believe the supporters say this is a good start.
Yeah, something's better than nothing. I know the MEC expressed was pleased with this development. And, we mentioned the collecting the online tax. There was the bill that was going to try to force companies to do that. Tate Reeves, the lieutenant governor, effectively killed it. But some online retailers are still choosing to voluntarily collect the tax. Now, that was Now, initially, Bobby, that money was going to go to the general fund, so they had to have this this legislation to actually get the money to go specifically to transportation, right?
Right. If this legislation does not pass, Amazon of course, is the biggest online retailer that has agreed to collect that tax, and Amazon itself could be providing about $30 million per year to the state, and unless this legislation passes, the money will go directly to the general fund to be divvied up just by the legislature at the end of the session on a whole bunch of issues. If this legislation passes, it would go directly to transportation needs. Of course, a flip side of this argument, Brad, is, of course, the general fund is in such bad shape that this money is needed for the general fund too. You're talking about cuts for nearly every state agency out there. You cuts for mental health, Department of Health, education is going to be level funded, but they want a few. Medicaid is facing a huge deficit, so they got a lot of problems with the budget. So this money could be a big help to just the state general fund, but it's kind of I guess that's the debate that's going to be had, whether it needs to go to the roads and bridges or whether it needs to go to the general fund to be divvied up amongst all the state agencies.
Well, for now at least, Bobby, transportation, giving transportation a funding boost, it's not dead yet. It's feeling better.
That's right.
This reminds me, you've seen the old Monty Python movie, right? The Holy Grail.
I've seen a couple of them.
Well,
the one with the guy guarding the bridge.
Yes, that one. One of the recurring things is that I'm not going to try an English accent. It's terrible, but basically, not dead yet. I'm feeling better. Speaking of dead legislation, but might not be quite dead yet, a bill dealing with the state flag and the universities that don't fly it, specifically Mississippi State and the University of Southern Mississippi. There's a bill that would require them to fly the state flag or not get certain tax breaks. But that bill did die late last week, Bobby, but the issue's not necessarily dead, is it?
No, it could be a major issue, a big contentious issue during the final weeks of the session. What happened last week, there was legislation in the House that would allow Mississippi State and Southern Mississippi to provide tax breaks to private companies that built dorm student housing on their campus. And William Shirley, a Republican from Quitman, offered and passed an amendment by a narrow margin, by a one-vote margin, I believe it was, that would require the state flag to be flown on those campuses before the tax break could be provided. And of course, none of the 8 public universities fly the state flag, which is controversial because it has the Confederate battle emblem as part of its design. And so Shirley said, that these are public universities and they should be flying the state flag. He got support of it wasn't a majority because a majority didn't vote, but he got a vote of the House to support his position. But then House Ways and Means Chair Jeff Smith just let that bill die instead of sending it on to the Senate. Yeah. He said that it was a separate Senate bill that would that can accomplish the same thing as far as giving the tax breaks that they'll take up later this session. But the issue is that there's other legislation pending that Shirley intends to offer this amendment to. I mean, like, for instance, when the university budget bills come up, he could offer that as a condition before they can get state money. They have to fly the state flag. So this could be a big issue in the final weeks of the session. And the fight over the state flag, and the universities don't fly the flag. A lot of school districts don't fly the flag, and then a lot of local towns also don't fly the flag. But the amendment Shirley plans to offer is directed solely at the universities, at the 8 public universities.
So how could this issue kind of reintroduce itself before the session's over?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So how in what form could we see this issue reintroduce itself?
Well, I mean, there's a budget, there's bond bills to finance long-term construction projects at the universities. There's budget bills to just provide state funding to universities, and he could try to add that language to those bond bills and budget bills. Just before you can receive state funding, you have to fly the state flag. And so it could be a major issue. Matter of fact, there's legislation. He tried to offer the legislation last week to a bond bill, and there was a point of order raised that the amendment wasn't proper, and Speaker Gunn is expected to rule on that point of order today. So it could come up it could come up again today.
Wow. And this could be, this seems kind of a murky issue, Bobby, and it could have become a free speech issue for the universities as well. I mean, just if they don't want to do it, then,
Well,
I think it was
yeah,
Philip Gunn that spoke to that, didn't he?
yeah. Speaker Gunn, and I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, but he said, if there's perception by the people at universities that this sends a bad image, uh, presents a bad image of university, that they're doing what they think is the best interest of universities, and to say that they can't do that, is which could be a free speech issue. So we'll see. I mean, the easy thing to do, well, it wouldn't be easy, but of course, Philip Gahn, the speaker, has come out in favor of changing the flag,
Right.
but he hadn't been able to get much, even get the issue to the House floor for a vote. And based on the vote last week, it'd be difficult to pass through the legislature right now. Any proposal to change the state flag. So this is an issue, I think, Brad, that's going to be with us for a while past
And
this legislative session.
yeah, I agree. Let's move on. And well, just to recap, talking about the state budget and the revenue collections, I just rattled off the numbers that you had in your story Sunday. Continues to be a problem, and one of the biggest challenges in getting this budget put together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be it's revenue keeps on coming up short. It has for well over a year now, and we're looking at possibly 2 years in a row where revenue collections are less than the previous year. That used to never happen, it appears it's going to happen 2 years in a row now, unless there's a surge in the final months of this budget year, which ends June 30th.
Right.
And a lot of agencies have been cut a lot. The governor's made multiple cuts because of sluggish revenue collections. The legislatures had to make cuts, and the budget has potential to be a real ugly budget that the legislature puts together at the end of this month.
Could we see even more cuts if they have to lower the budget number that they have to, they put out it's usually 6 billion plus, but if they have to lower that because of the collections, could we see more cuts? We've already seen a bunch.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that there's going to be more cuts in the budget legislature puts together for the upcoming budget year, which starts July 1st. The question is going to be whether the governor has to make more cuts this current budget year, which we got Medicaid already has facing a deficit of about $75-80 million.
Yeah.
So it can't sustain any more cuts, and they got to find money to try to make it whole for the upcoming budget year. About mental health and Department of Health having huge budget cuts. Department of Health's already eliminated a bunch of programs, so has mental health. So we'll just have to see what happens. And of course, Brad, what shouldn't be lost is the major tax cut that the legislature passed in the 2016 session doesn't even begin to kick in until next year. So that could take more revenue out of the
Yeah.
out of the budget stream out of for the agency. So it could be we could really have some major layoffs in the coming months.
Yeah, and that's one thing that a lot of people blame the issue on is all the tax cuts under legitimate reason to say the collections have been down?
Well, I think there's no doubt that that's at least part of the reason. I mean, a lot of states are struggling with revenue collections, but most states I don't think are actually collecting less revenue than the previous year. So I mean, I think it's fair to say at least part of the problems on the tax collections or the tax cuts that's been passed. State economist Darren Webb has said as much. But the legislative leadership maintained that over a period of years that these tax cuts are going to be good for the state. Will make the state more competitive when competing for other states for economic development projects. So we just have to see what happens in the long run.
All right. Well, before you get blacked out again, Bobby, let's wrap up the show with the three things.
Yeah, we better wrap it up fast.
Three things from the past week down in the state capitol. Three important things. Let's start with the most impactful lawmaker from the past week.
Well, I think it's easy to say William Shirley, who I referenced earlier. He's a conservative, rural Republican from Quitman County, not Quitman County. I'm sorry, that's Quitman County's in the Delta, from Clark County down in sort of east central Mississippi, which is the town of Quitman. These flag amendments, they have the potential to really slow the process down during the final couple of weeks and create a bunch of controversy. So for better or worse, he's an impactful legislature for the past week.
Most impactful piece of legislation from this past week?
Well, Brad, the education budget bill, if you recall, Speaker Philip Gunn and the House opted not to fund the program that provides local money to the state. Provide state money to local school districts. They said they were going to do that in a special session as part of the rewrite of the education funding formula, which of course has been a slow process and is expected to be addressed in a special session in the coming weeks. But last week, the Senate Appropriations Committee Chairman Bud Clark, Republican from Hollandale, opted to go ahead and fund local school districts at level funding about $2.2 billion. So that creates the specter that they may not be as close on the education funding formula rewrite as they want to be, and because Clark decided to go ahead and fund just to provide the money to local school districts. So that was a significant development last week for education.
And finally, Bobby, the strangest occurrence in the state capitol this past week.
Well, Senator Hob Bryan was involved in it. He was actually was in the House when it happened, but I've heard vivid recounts of it. There's a bill, Brad, that would provide loosen the restrictions on University of Mississippi Medical Center in terms of competing with the other hospitals to enter into agreements with local hospitals as far as bringing in doctors and stuff. And a lot of the local hospitals, some of the bigger local hospitals, are not enamored with that agreement and with that proposal, that legislation. Senator Hob Bryan was going to offer an amendment to the bill on a deadline day, but before he could offer that amendment, Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves, in an unusual move, quickly adjourned the session of the legislature, so Bryan could not offer that amendment. Bryan was very upset about it, yelled various things, trying to get a roll call vote on the adjournment, but there was no roll call vote to come, and Bryan was not able to offer that amendment because it was deadline day. So that was an unusual event that and then on the same day when the Mississippi Economic Council was having a press conference with Speaker Philip Gunn to tout the aforementioned road and bridge plan that they had passed. At the end of the press conference, Hob Bryan took the podium to offer an alternative view, which kind of put a damper on the MEC press conference, because he talked about how if the legislature hadn't passed all the tax cuts we were talking about, there would be money available to address the road and bridge needs without having to take these unusual and special steps.
All right. Well, good stuff as always, Bobby. And thank you all for tuning in to Capitol View. Again, coming to you every Monday around 2 o'clock live at djournal.com. If you miss it or want to watch it again, just catch the replay later in the day. at djournal.com. Follow Bobby on Twitter at BobbyHarrison9. I'm on there as well at Brad Locke. And that's it for this episode of Capitol View. We will be back next Monday to catch y'all up to speed to what's going on. Until then, for Bobby Harrison, I'm Brad Locke. You'll have a good week.